Encounter 1, The Forest's Call. It was a crisp autumn evening when Jake and his friends decided to venture into the dense woods that bordered their small town. The forest was notorious for its eerie atmosphere, with towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets to those who dared to enter. Local legends spoke of strange occurrences, but the allure of adventure was too tempting for the group of thrill seekers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the group set out with flashlights in hand. Laughter and chatter filled the air, masking the growing sense of unease that crept into their hearts. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon an old abandoned campsite. Tattered tents and rusted camping gear lay scattered, as if the previous occupants had left in a hurry. A chill ran down Jake's spine as he noticed the claw marks etched into the trees, deep and jagged, as if something had tried to tear its way through the forest. "Guys, check this out," Jake called, his voice barely above a whisper. The group gathered around, their flashlights illuminating the marks. A sense of dread settled over them, and the forest seemed to grow silent, as if holding its breath. Suddenly, a low, mechanical hum filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard, a haunting melody that seemed to resonate within their very bones. Panic set in as they realized the source of the sound was moving closer, the ground vibrating beneath their feet. "Run!" someone shouted, and the group scattered, their flashlights bobbing wildly as they sprinted through the underbrush. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed himself to keep up, the sound of the siren growing ever closer. He glanced back, and his blood ran cold. Emerging from the shadows was a towering figure, its elongated limbs and skeletal frame silhouetted against the darkness. Atop its head, a pair of sirens blared their eerie tune, the sound echoing through the forest like a call to the damned. Jake's legs burned with exertion as he pushed himself harder, the creature's footsteps thundering behind him. He could hear his friends' cries of terror, but they seemed distant, swallowed by the forest's oppressive silence. Just as he thought he could run no more, the trees parted, revealing the edge of the forest. With a final burst of energy, Jake broke through the underbrush and collapsed onto the grass, gasping for breath. The siren's call faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of his ragged breathing and the rustle of leaves in the wind. The group regrouped, shaken but alive, their eyes wide with fear. They never spoke of what they had seen that night, but the memory of the siren's call haunted them, a reminder of the terror that lurked within the forest's depths. Encounter 2, The Abandoned Town. The second encounter with Siren Head took place in a forgotten town, long abandoned and left to decay. Emily, a photographer with a penchant for urban exploration, had heard whispers of the town's eerie atmosphere and decided it was the perfect location for her next project. Armed with her camera and a sense of adventure, she set out to capture the haunting beauty of the derelict buildings. The town was a ghostly sight, with crumbling facades and overgrown streets that seemed to echo with the memories of its past inhabitants. As Emily wandered through the desolate streets, she felt a strange sense of being watched, as if the town itself was aware of her presence. She paused to photograph an old church, its steeple reaching towards the sky like a skeletal finger. The air was still, the only sound the soft click of her camera shutter. But as she moved to capture another angle, a low, mournful wail drifted through the air, sending a shiver down her spine. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound was distant, yet it seemed to reverberate through the empty streets, growing louder with each passing moment. She turned, scanning the horizon for the source of the noise, but the town remained silent and still. Determined to uncover the mystery, Emily followed the sound, her footsteps echoing off the cracked pavement. The wail grew into a cacophony of sirens, a discordant symphony that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Her pulse quickened as she realized she was not alone. Rounding a corner, she came face to face with the source of the sound. Towering above her was Siren Head, its grotesque form silhouetted against the setting sun. The creature's sirens blared their haunting tune, the sound piercing the air like a knife. Emily's instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to move, rooted to the spot by a mix of terror and fascination. She raised her camera, snapping a photo of the creature as it loomed closer, its elongated limbs reaching out as if to ensnare her. The flash of the camera seemed to startle Siren Head, and for a brief moment, the sirens fell silent. Seizing the opportunity, Emily turned and fled, her heart racing as she sprinted through the abandoned streets. The creature's footsteps thundered behind her, a relentless pursuit that drove her onward. She reached the edge of town, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stumbled onto the main road. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of her pounding heart and the rustle of leaves in the wind. Emily never returned to the town, but the image of Siren Head remained burned into her memory, a chilling reminder of the encounter that nearly cost her everything. Her photograph, a blurred snapshot of the creature, became a testament to the terror that lurked in the shadows of the forgotten town. Encounter 3: The Night Shift. The final encounter with Siren Head unfolded in the dead of night at a remote radio station nestled deep in the countryside. Tom, a night shift technician, was accustomed to the solitude and silence that accompanied his late hours. The station was a relic from a bygone era, its equipment outdated but functional, broadcasting to a dwindling audience. On this particular night, a storm raged outside, the wind howling through the trees and rain lashing against the windows. Tom sat in the dimly lit control room, monitoring the broadcast and adjusting the dials with practiced ease. The rhythmic hum of the equipment was a comforting presence, a constant in the otherwise eerie stillness. As the clock ticked past midnight, a strange interference crackled through the speakers, a low, distorted sound that sent a chill down Tom's spine. He frowned, adjusting the frequency in an attempt to clear the signal, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Curiosity piqued, Tom donned his raincoat and ventured outside, the storm battering him as he made his way to the transmission tower. The wind whipped around him, carrying with it a faint, mechanical wail that seemed to echo through the night. Reaching the base of the tower, Tom paused, his breath visible in the cold air. The wail grew louder, a haunting melody that resonated within his very bones. He scanned the darkness, his flashlight cutting through the rain, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just as he was about to return to the safety of the control room, a flash of lightning illuminated the landscape, revealing a towering figure standing at the edge of the clearing. Siren Head loomed in the distance, its sirens blaring their eerie tune, the sound reverberating through the storm. Panic surged through Tom as he realized the creature was moving towards him, its elongated limbs cutting through the rain with terrifying speed. He turned and ran, his heart pounding in his chest as he sprinted back to the station, the sirens growing ever closer. Bursting through the door, Tom slammed it shut and locked it, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The control room was a sanctuary, the equipment humming softly as if oblivious to the terror outside, but the sirens continued to wail, a relentless reminder of the creature that lurked just beyond the walls. Tom huddled in the corner, his eyes fixed on the door as the storm raged on. The sirens eventually faded, swallowed by the howling wind, but the memory of the encounter lingered, a chilling reminder of the night he came face to face with Siren Head. The radio station remained operational, but Tom never worked the night shift again. The experience left him haunted, a shadow of the man he once was, forever marked by the terror that had stalked him through the storm. In the weeks following the encounters, the stories of Siren Head spread like wildfire through the small communities. Whispers of the creature's presence reached the ears of local authorities, but skepticism and disbelief were the common responses. Yet, for those who had come face to face with the towering terror, the fear was all too real. Jake, Emily, and Tom found themselves drawn together by their shared experiences, each haunted by the memory of their encounter. They met in a small cafe on the outskirts of town, their eyes shadowed with sleepless nights and unspoken fears. The air was thick with tension as they recounted their stories, each detail adding to the growing sense of dread. "We can't be the only ones," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There must be others who have seen it." Tom nodded, his hands trembling as he sipped his coffee. "I tried to tell my boss about what happened, but he just laughed it off, said it was probably a prank or a trick of the light." Jake leaned forward, his expression grim. "We need to find out more about this thing. There has to be a reason it's here, why it's targeting us." The trio decided to investigate further, determined to uncover the truth behind the legend of Siren Head. They scoured local archives and online forums, piecing together fragments of information that hinted at the creature's origins. Stories of strange disappearances and unexplained phenomena stretched back decades, each account more chilling than the last. Their research led them to an old, weathered journal hidden away in the dusty shelves of the town library. The journal belonged to a long-deceased local historian who had dedicated his life to documenting the supernatural occurrences in the area. His entries spoke of a creature that roamed the forests and abandoned places, a harbinger of doom that preyed on the unwary. According to the historian, Siren Head was an ancient entity, a remnant of a forgotten time when the world was wilder and more mysterious. It was said to be drawn to places of desolation and decay, feeding on the fear and despair of those who crossed its path. The sirens, he wrote, were its voice, a haunting call that lured its victims into the shadows. Armed with this knowledge, Jake, Emily, and Tom devised a plan to confront the creature and put an end to its reign of terror. They gathered supplies and equipment, preparing for a journey into the heart of the forest, where Jake had first encountered Siren Head. It was a risky venture, but they knew it was their only chance to rid their town of the nightmare that haunted them. As they set out on their mission, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. The forest loomed ahead, a dark and foreboding presence that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. The trio steeled themselves for the confrontation, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination. They knew the path would be fraught with danger, but they were united in their resolve. Together, they would face the terror that lurked in the shadows, determined to uncover the truth and put an end to the legend of Siren Head once and for all. The forest was a different world at night, its familiar paths transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Jake, Emily, and Tom moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they navigated the dense underbrush. The air was thick with tension, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs setting their nerves on edge. They followed the trail that Jake had taken during his first encounter, the memory of that night vivid in his mind. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. It was as if the very woods were conspiring to keep them from their goal. As they ventured deeper, the familiar hum of the sirens began to echo through the trees, a haunting melody that sent shivers down their spines. The sound was distant at first, but it grew louder with each step, a relentless reminder of the creature that awaited them. "We're getting close," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible over the wail of the sirens. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, his heart pounding in his chest. Emily and Tom nodded, their expressions grim but resolute. They pressed on, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves that covered the forest floor. The sirens grew louder, a discordant symphony that seemed to resonate within their very bones. Suddenly, the trees parted, revealing a clearing bathed in the eerie glow of the moon. In the center stood Siren Head, its grotesque form silhouetted against the night sky. The creature's sirens blared their haunting tune, the sound reverberating through the clearing like a call to the damned. The trio froze, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination. They had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, Jake stepped forward, his voice steady despite the terror that gripped him. "Siren Head!" he called, his voice echoing through the clearing. "We know what you are. We know why you're here." The creature paused, its sirens falling silent as it turned its attention to the intruders. The air was thick with tension, the silence oppressive as the two sides faced off. Emily raised her camera, snapping a photo of the creature as it loomed closer. The flash seemed to startle Siren Head, and for a brief moment, the sirens fell silent. Seizing the opportunity, Tom stepped forward, his voice firm and commanding. "You don't belong here," he said, his words carrying through the clearing. "This is our home, and we won't let you terrorize us any longer." The creature hesitated, its elongated limbs twitching as if uncertain. The sirens began to wail once more, a mournful sound that seemed to echo with the weight of ages. But the trio stood their ground, united in their resolve. They had faced their fears and confronted the terror that had haunted them for so long. And in that moment, they knew they had won. The sirens faded into the distance, swallowed by the rustle of leaves in the wind. Siren Head retreated into the shadows, its presence a lingering memory that would haunt the forest for years to come. Jake, Emily, and Tom watched as the creature disappeared, their hearts filled with a sense of triumph and relief. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. As they made their way back through the forest, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape. The nightmare was over, but the memory of their encounter would remain, a testament to the power of courage and friendship in the face of unimaginable terror.